Hello, everyone. So, I've been meaning to do this for a while, but I want to basically create a video for intro to arranging. So, I'm going to be using my first ever arrangement movement to do this and show you my thought process on how I got into it and what steps I did. So, the first steps are to find a song that inspires you to do cool things with it. You want to write out a concept map of what you want the song to be. So we need highs and lows in the song, making sure that we're building to the right points, and then also like creating those moments. So where in the song do you want those like hit moments to be? After you kind of create your little concept map, you can go into MuseScore. I'm going to show you some basics of MuseScore and how to make the process go a little bit faster with some shortcuts that I use. So, first of all, when you click the measure, you click the entire like measure, but when you actually click a note, then you can hear that note. When you want to play something, if you click the measure and start playing, then only that part will play, and then if you click a note, then all the parts will play. If you want to isolate certain parts, you can either go to the mixture and solo the parts, but normally what I do is if I just want to hear how it sounds like the soprano, alto, tenor, then I'll click shift and then I'll press the space bar to play and just hear those three parts. When I write notes in to be in like the note writing mode, you click N, and now I can put notes in here. So I click N to write notes and N to not write notes. So that's a big helper instead of going all the way up. I don't even know where that button is on my screen to do that. I'm not gonna lie. I don't even, is it home? Nope. I like use mostly my keyboard and that's just what works for me. So I click N and then I usually find the note on the measure, but if you know you want it to be a C, it's gonna give you a C. The only problem with that is, if you wanted to put an E in here, it's gonna put like the high one in. It's just gonna put whatever is closer to the middle. Normally, I think if I were to change this, if I were to click E, then it will go to the closest note. Um, so yeah, you can either just click N and then click where you want the note to be, or um, click the letter after you hit N. Okay. And then now in terms of the rhythms, I use keyboard shortcuts as well. So a quarter note is actually says it all up here. So a quarter note is 5, an eighth note's 4, a 16th note is 3, a half note is 6, a whole note is 7. My brain works really good with numbers, so like that's easier for me to remember. Although when I was still getting used to it, I would just kind of like flick whatever number until I got the right one. I feel like I would mess up the 4 gives quarter note, but it's not, it's 5. So I would mess that up a lot. But it's easier to click 4 than 5 than to like go all the way up here and then, do that. When you're hitting the keyboard, if you're in the notation mode, then it's going to be you're changing the value of the note that you want to put in. If you want to change the value of a note that's already there, you can just click it and then like, oh, I want this to be an eighth note. Bam. Whole note. Bam. You know? So that makes it a lot easier for me. The other things, like a slur to slur notes is S, to tie notes is T. To make a dotted note, it's just a period. They're mostly pretty self-explanatory. Um, and then if I want to move notes up or down, I know I personally like to use the arrow keys. But I know some other people like to just like slide it up and down. As you can see, it's a little bit laggy. If you forget any of the things when you're still learning and trying to pick up these shortcuts, um, see, it'll have the keyboard shortcut in parentheses, TS. So that can be helpful too if there's something that I forgot. To put text in, it's Control T, and that's text. That's if you wanted to any that yeah, that's text. For rehearsal letters, I usually just click that. Oh, Control L is lyrics, so that's helpful. For chords, oh, it's K. Okay. So chord symbol is Control K, and then that's what will play a chord. Um, if you, the chord, realizing the chord symbols is turned on. Um, so you need to, if you need to know whether the chord is being played or not, then just click it. And then if you hear something, then it's on, and if not, then it's off. That's how you know if it's being played with everything else. And then I keep this panel on the left here. You can add the palettes that you want here. Obviously, like I don't need, okay, well, I just added it, but you don't need to know things that don't apply to singers, like fingerings. So take that away. Um, so yeah, everything you need should be here. In order to change the key signature, that's also here. To change the voice parts, you can add, this is like something you'll set up at the beginning, but you'll add here and you can change these by clicking replace instrument. And I normally use piano. I don't use the voices. Using the voices can be very helpful to hear how the chords sound when they're sustained. But I just use piano because I can't listen to voices personally when I'm arranging. Say I want to, all right, I'm about to print this out. So one thing I can do is, all right, I don't need the chords line, so I'm gonna hide that. Um, yeah, MuseScore might crash if you do something it doesn't like. So I think right now it doesn't like this and it might freeze on me. All right, we're back. So I can hide this and I can hide the percussion part. And then if I go to save it, export as PDF, it will export the parts that are not hid. So yeah. And then I'll go make sure to click all parts combined onto one file, or music XML file if you're exporting the MuseScore. I like to look at it in continuous view. You can change that down here. When going into page view, these little like arrows, you can delete to make it more condensed. I don't know how those get there, and I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, you can delete those if you're like, why is this entire measure spanning over an entire page? It's probably because there's one of these at that measure, and then you can just delete it. Another thing to make it more condensed is to go to Format and Page Settings. And then my first go-to is usually the staff space. And this will change the space between staves. So yeah. Oh, cancel. Um, so yeah, I think that's basically the what you need to know in terms of actually just using the software. So the first thing that I do, so as you can see here, my top line is for chords, and the reason I did this way is because the chord symbols are realized, which means that it will play the chords when you write them in. There is a setting to turn that off, which I don't think. Yeah, realize chord symbols. I think that's it. Um, and that basically will play the chord when you write them in the measure. So you don't really want that to happen when you're writing it because then it will play on top of the notes that you wrote and it will sound different. Um, when I wrote First Light, I was able to basically mute that and just write it on the solo line. So you can do either of those. But the first thing is definitely getting down the chord structure of the song and the solo line and the tempo. So I have the chords in here. I think I had them at the top and I deleted them for the whole song, but I definitely write in the chords for most of it. If it gets repetitive, then I'll stop, as much as you need. Um, the tempo is important, the time signature, of course, which like can all be edited over here. the key. And then so this is pretty known, but soprano and alto use treble clef. Tenor, you use the treble clef with the eight at the bottom of the clef so that it's down an octave, and then bass clef for bass. And then if you were to have a mezzo line, you would do another treble clef, and a baritone line, um, I think uses bass clef as well. Yeah. And then this little percussion area, you don't really have to put that in. If you just choose a percussive instrument like a drum set down here, then that will go in on its own. First, what I would do is I listen to the song and I basically just transcribe the solo line. And that's kind of like my first step. That's like the basics is okay, what do I want the song to sound like? Where are my moments? Any cuts if you want to, cut a verse out or like cut the bridge down, cut the end out. Like, where's the cut gonna be? How long is it gonna be? And then putting the tempo, chords, and solo line into MuseScore. So, you also want to figure out you want it to be a duet or you want some kind of featured part, whether you want SATB or SMATBB. If you're beginning, I would start off just solo SATB. Keep it simple. Um, so once I have the solo line in, I start um figuring out, I just kind of work on the notes. So what you see here is called like pad chords. So it's more of just getting the chord structure underneath the solo, and providing support to the solo without really having anything stick out too much. And then we have kind of more like harmony kind of movements here. I personally do vowels last, but sometimes I'll already have in mind what I want the vowels to be, but it can be really cool to play around with the vowels more. So for this arrangement, I knew that I wanted to have this moment be really big, move like gray skies. Like that's the vision I saw in my head. One thing that I struggled with was building back up to the chorus here. So that kind of took two iterations. I did it better when I redid it for the album, than for the ICCA set. I usually don't write VP into my arrangements because I don't really know a lot about VP, and would be just a lot of time that I really don't want to put into it. I kind of like to let the VP see what they do, and then, if there's just, if anything, just write down like what my thoughts are for, if like I in my head I hear there's like no VP for a certain part, then I'll just like write no VP in the percussion line, or just at the bottom. Um, but usually I just kind of let the vocal percussionists do their thing, especially because Yoni is correct. So, and Adam is also correct, and he did a great job with this, and so yeah, but you can definitely write in a VP. You can even just write in like a simple VP. I know for Adam's arrangements, he wrote in a pretty detailed part of what he wanted for it. So you can do either or. Okay, next I'm going to talk about voicing. So a few rules with voicing. In terms of the chord symbols, if you see this F sharp major over C sharp, that means like that's usually the kind of guitar tabs notation, which is easier than reading the old like 3/5 symbols if you did music theory. That just means that C sharp is the bass note. So if you have the chords and you have the chord and then like a C sharp minor over E, then you basically have the bass notes there for you, and you can just use that, and that's exactly what I did here. So we have, yeah, C sharp, E, A, G sharp, C sharp, A, and E, as it's right here. So that's how I get the bass notes. And then I build up. So normally for a beginning of the song, I'm gonna start the sopranos not too high. And so we can have that build. I keep the soprano part pretty low until the chorus, and then I go up. right here. So I definitely want to build up the soprano. Um, but yeah. And then in terms of the space between parts, the rule of thumb is no more than an octave between parts, and you usually shouldn't have any part crossing, so I wouldn't give the altos a G and the sopranos an E. That's just like basic rules to follow. You can break those rules. They're generally rules to guide you to how to make chords that sound good. It's helpful, but it's not like cut unless you're taking a AP Music Theory class, then you have to follow the rules. So that's for the spacing between notes. So that's just looking at one chord, how is the spacing? And then we have a chord. Chord usually has three notes in a chord. Usually there can be like if you have a seven chord, there's four, or a nine chord, there's five. Or like an add four and add two, that would be four. But generally you want to double the root of the chord. So that means that whatever the bass note has, you want to double that note pretty much, or double the first note of the chord. So if you have, say, we have a F sharp minor over C sharp. So that's this chord right here. So I decided here to have F, A, C, and C. So I doubled the root of the chord, not the tonic. The tonic in this case would be F sharp and the root would be C sharp because that's the note on the bottom. So I decided to double the root and not the tonic. You can also double the tonic. What you wouldn't want to do here is, so in this chord we have 1, 3, and 5. F sharp is 1, A is 3, and C sharp is 5. So doubling the tonic would mean doubling 1 and having two F sharps in this chord, whereas doubling the root would be doubling the bass note, which is the 5. So I have the 5 and two fives, a 3, and a 1. Um, Whereas the chord before is just a normal G sharp chord here. So for this chord, I have G sharp, so I have G, um, B, D, and G. So I decided to double the one of the chord. If it doesn't make sense voice leading wise to double the root, you can also double the third, but you generally don't want to double the fifth unless it's also the root, which it is in this case. So yeah. All right. Now moving on to transitioning between chords. So looking at these chords here, I have a G to a G. Very easy, very simple. If there are common notes with chords, generally just keep that person on that note. Now we look at, I have an E to a D. Easy, one note change, like one step change, perfect. Okay, and then I have a C to a B. Sorry if I'm not saying sharp and flats. My brain doesn't work that way. It's too much effort for me. And then, the bass is already written out, so I'm not really worrying about that so much. So that's one, is trying to make it easily readable. You don't want to have the G jump to like a C right here. Um, so trying to keep, the notes pretty close to each other on a part. Another thing is what's called, you have parallel motion, relative motion, and contrary motion. You want to try to have contrary motion. So I saw that, oh, my bass part goes up here. It goes from C to E. So I want to have the other parts go down to have contrary motion. So I have an E to a D and a C to a B. So that's what good contrary motion is having, basically, I kind of treat it as the other parts moving in a different direction than the bass line. Um, and that normally sounds good. If I had all the parts go up here, that would be relative motion. It's all going up. And when it all shifts up, um, it generally doesn't sound as good as contrary motion. It doesn't mean you can never do this. It just is a good guide to, okay, how should I voice this chord? Oh, I should move these parts down. Now, what's the difference between relative and parallel motion? This is an example of relative motion here. So we have this C and it goes down 2 steps, and then we have this F and it only goes down 1 step. So that would be relative motion. They're going in the same direction, but not in the same interval. Parallel motion would be in the same direction and the same interval, which we can see here. They're both going down by 1 step. So sometimes parallel motion sounds good, sometimes it sounds bad. Um, Generally, what's good parallel motion is uh when basically the distance between these two notes are either a third or a sixth. And an inverted third is a sixth. So that would be like C and E or C and A. And then obviously like A to C would be a third, but C to A would be a sixth. So that's what I mean by inverted. So generally thirds and sixes is good parallel motion, that's fine. What you want to avoid is parallel motion with fifths and octaves and also fourths. Fourths are a little bit better than fifths and octaves. Um, so I hopefully I don't think there are any examples of that in here because I tried to avoid that. This is my first arrangement. I kind of went more by the book. Um, so that would basically be if I had essentially just the bass line in the um that looks like more of an alto part. Um, if like this was the alto line and it was the same as the bass line, that would be parallel octaves, and you want to try to avoid that. And then parallel fifths would be if I moved, this is a C and a G. If I moved this down with that. So that would be parallel fifths. And then parallel, because there's a difference, a C and a G is a fifth interval, and they both move down by the same interval. So that's what you want to try to avoid when going from chord to chord. Other tips that I would have is just one time in high school, I arranged a song with two of my friends, and what they did is they actually just recorded a part that they sang. They just sang the part and made it up and then recorded that. And that's how they arranged it. They did all the notation afterward. So basically that's to say that a good way to do it is just to listen to it and then like if I can't figure out, say, if I wrote like 3 measures of chords, I don't know what to write next. What I'll do is sing those measures and then just make up a part in my head and see if it sounds good. I sing soprano, so I'm typically better at doing this with the soprano line. Um, but I am also okay with the altos and tenors, and then the bass line is usually given for me, which is helpful. So I'm not really great at writing like a complicated or really unique bass line like you'll see in Nobody. So basically this chord right here is what I did. So I basically just I didn't for some chords I'll kind of just be like, "Oh, I want this chord to be crunchy and I want it to sound crunchy, but like I don't exactly know like what chord I want it to be." Um, so I basically would just sing the first 2 notes and then make up the third note and be like, okay, what do I like hear in my head? And then that's how I wrote this chord, is I basically just sang these 2 notes for each part. And then also used my music theory knowledge to kind of fill it in. Like, okay, this is generally the chord that it should be. But I want to add crunch to it, so I kind of added crunch to it just by making it up. And a way to get better at this is when you're listening to music in the car, like make up a cappella parts to those to like the song. Okay, I'll just like kind of sing notes in the chord on ah and then like just kind of make stuff up. That's all it is. You're kind of just making stuff up. You have a lot of freedom when you're arranging, and that can be a little bit difficult for me, which is why these rules are really helpful for me. Um, but if you're not one of those people who likes to follow the rules, then just you can use these rules as a way to be like, oh, I don't really like how this sounds. Let me see if there are parallel fifths or parallel octaves, or there's like a really big gap between the soprano and alto, that kind of stuff. So you can use these rules in multiple ways, and they don't have to govern how exactly how you're going to write the music. The bigger parts in the song, you have a wider range of notes, so the soprano part's going to be higher, and the bass part's going to be lower. You can also play around with, when you want the basses to drop out and like kind of get a more exposed feeling, and also like when you want the basses to come in. So for Symptom of Life, that was a little bit of a harder song to build because it's pretty just stagnant. So I had the basses enter in the second verse. And like that that like entrance kind of brings like a support to that part. I would say definitely listen to other a cappella arrangements. I know that like listening to Pitch Please's album definitely inspired me, especially when writing First Light. And just think about like listen to those, really good artists or other sets and see like what they're doing. Like how many things are really going on at once, and seeing like, oh, this part's literally just the solo and the bass line and that's it. And like that's okay, you know? Like that's cool. So you can play around with that. Um, but yeah, I hope that this helps and I didn't forget anything important. And good luck. Feel free to ask me questions. Um, yeah, have fun. Bye.